Oh, Bob, what a beautiful day out today. Doesn't it remind you of back when we were youngins back in the 40s?
Oh, the 40s, you say? What a time in American history.
Oh, yeah, remember when candy used to be a nickel?
Oh, those were the days. Gas was 15 cents a gallon.
It was even less, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, is this what I think it is? Is this In the Mood by Glenn Miller and his big band? Oh, doesn't this just bring you back to the good old days? The days when you could go out to the dance on a Friday night with your favorite gal and just dance the night away, doing the swing and the Lindy. Oh, don't you wish you could go back to those times? I think that we should reminisce about these times, talk about some of the best parts of the 40s, don't you? That's what I thought. Well, let's start talking. Do you remember that fateful day back in December of 1941 when the Japanese destroyed the naval harbor of Pearl Harbor? It was the first real attack on America in years. People were very upset. So much happened and everybody knew that there would be a consequence for this, and so there was. Remember President Roosevelt's Day in Infamy speech saying that we declared war on Japan? We knew it was coming, and therefore he joined the war. And after this, many people became worried about our troops out in the Indochina area around the Bataan Peninsula. When Japan destroyed Pearl Harbor, the US didn't have any real ships, or that many ships that matter, to help the Pacific, and that was a real problem for people in the Bataan Peninsula as Japanese were coming to take advantage of them. The 5-star general, Douglas MacArthur, had to leave actually. He couldn't stay as there was many thoughts that when the Japanese came he would be killed instantly, as there were so many of them and he was the highest rank as he was a 5-star general. So he reluctantly left to go to Australia, and he told his troops he would be back to come help. When the Japanese came, they fought with not many resources for about 4 months. The US fought beside the Philippines that were there, and they fought for 4 months until there was a surrender. And this surrender led to the Bataan Death March. 72,000 American and Filipino troops marched a 60-mile treacherous journey to internment camps where they were tortured and they had no true resources, and it was pretty much concentration camps like in Germany, but with Americans and Japanese in it. This led to many people being very upset with how America was being treated by the Japanese. So many Japanese people in America were getting not treated very well. And this led to Japanese internment camps in the US, where people on the Pacific side of the US had to go straight to internment camps more inland because the US really just didn't trust these people. But families were told they had to leave their houses and were brought to these internment camps until they decided they didn't have to be there anymore.
On June 6, 1944, Allied troops finally regained control of France. This day, known as D-Day, came to relief to many people in the United States and in the world, as it finally seemed like Nazi Germany was going to fall. This was a major step as it gave the Allied troops a foothold in continental Europe. Led by 5-star general and eventual president Dwight Eisenhower, Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy with over 5,000 ships and 1,300 aircraft. This day, seen as a major turning point in the war, could be seen as the war would not have ended as it did without this day.
When Franklin Roosevelt dies in office, Harry Truman takes his place. Harry Truman starts his political career off through the political machine. The political machine is the group of big businesses who select candidates, and they pretty much have their candidate do whatever they tell him to do. And Truman decides to not do this and picks his own laws and just pretty much kind of use them for their money by the end. And Truman has to make one of the biggest decisions in the entire U.S. history: what to do with the atomic bomb. He didn't even know there was an atomic bomb when he was vice president, and all of a sudden he has to decide if they drop it on Japan or not. Even though World War II ended, we were still fighting with Japan. And he had to make the decision on whether or not to use this controversial bomb. He does warn Japan, and their emperor doesn't say anything back. He gave them 2 warnings on 2 different occasions. And finally, he drops the bomb, and the whole city of Hiroshima is obliterated. There's a second bomb, though, and the second bomb happens a week later after another warning. And finally, after all of the entire metropolis area of Japan is destroyed, their emperor finally says, "We're done," and there's no more war.
After World War II finished, world power was in the hands of 2 countries, the United States and the Soviet Union, one communist and one capitalist. The Soviets wanted to keep Soviet lands from World War II that they took from other countries and keep it as Soviet Union land. The Soviet leader, Joseph Stalin, was a power-hungry man who wanted the Soviet Union to dominate the world. U.S. President Harry Truman wanted to use a containment strategy on the Soviet Union to keep communism in Eastern Europe. Many people had strategies on how to do this. George F. Kennan explained in his Mr. X papers that the United States was the only country that could contain the Soviet Union. But Stalin wanted to have the whole world become communist. Our 2 countries had decent relations, but after a surveillance scandal when U.S. air troops flew over Soviet lands, which Truman wanted to stop but troops didn't get the memo, Stalin lost trust in the U.S. and the struggle of nuclear supremacy began. With the amount of nuclear weapons, each country had to stop the conflict. With the press of a button, the whole world could have ended.
Bob, after all that Cold War stuff, of course I'll take out my Soviet Union map because I obviously have that on my hands. But here we have our handy-dandy map of the Soviet Union. And you can see that all the colored areas are mainly where the Soviet Union was located. And all the darker ones are bordering it. And all of those countries were very close to communist ideas, obviously, and the U.S. wanted to make sure that there weren't more communist countries and more additions to the Soviet Union, so obviously, your boy Harry Truman comes up with the idea of the Truman Doctrine that gives aid to Greece, the home of democracy. So obviously we don't want that to go to communism because that would just be not a very good look for us. We got our ideas from Greece. And also the Marshall Plan. And the Marshall Plan gave recovery to other European countries like Turkey and other Western European places that needed help recovering from World War II and maybe having them come on our side so that there aren't more communist countries and additions to the Soviet Union in the world. Truman really wanted to try and ease the worries of the United States people, and he does it by signing the National Security Act in 1947, and its main idea back then was just to help people not be worried about communism and really keep our country safe from the communist ways. Many new organizations also started from this, like the CIA, and also the Department of Defense also started, and the idea of the Secretary of Defense started at this time as well. When NATO, or the National Treaty Organization, started, their main idea was to stop communism throughout the Soviet Union. They wanted to help make peaceful treaties throughout Western Europe and throughout the world. And they were also the first peacetime military alliance in the United States that was entered outside of the Western Hemisphere. The main countries that were included were France, Great Britain, and the United States, and the first official meeting and its headquarters was in Brussels, Belgium. Man, Bob, those 40s were sure crazy, weren't they?
Yeah, those 40s sure shook up the world for a lasting time.
The online work is very helpful. You need to do it because there's not very many points in this class, and it's a big boost to your grade. It also gives you possible questions that might be on the test, and like the type of questions are like very similar to what you're going to see on Mr. Nygaard's test. So that's why you should probably do your online.